Welcome to the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsay Dowd. My goal is to help train leaders and sales organizations how to manage and deliver results with empathy, compassion, and kindness. Let's get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to the next episode of Heartbeat for Hire. And we are very lucky to have our next guest, Craig Dowden, today. Craig is going to put the science behind what I love so much, heartbeats and not head count. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a little bio on Craig so you know who you're listening to. So Craig Dowden is a PhD, a certified positive psychology coach. He has a doctorate in psychology with a concentration in business. Great combo. An engaging and inspiring coach, Craig partners with leaders and executives from diverse industries and sectors to work on their most important challenges. In his role as trusted advisor, Craig integrates the latest findings in the science of leadership, team organizational excellence into his coaching and consulting work. He is a best-selling author, executive coach, award-winning keynote speaker, regular contributor to Forbes, Financial Post, HuffPost, Psychology Today, and Financial Times, and so much more. Welcome, Craig.
Oh, thanks so much, Lyndsay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. I know we have a lot in common. So
we do. And I was just so excited when I saw that you were going to be a guest because, as you know, I'm so passionate about compassionate leadership and culture and making sure people have an environment they can thrive in. And so to have somebody who's a doctorate in this and who speaks about this so articulately, what a thrill for this audience. So I would love to know what sparked your interest in this in the first place.
Yeah, well, thank you, and it's such an important question and ties in beautifully with the setup and your passion, because one of the things that I was really excited about, I just love human behavior. I've been fascinated by human behavior. And then when you integrate people, individual personalities into businesses, organizations that have personalities, it's a fascinating combination. And then as I was getting into the coaching work and the leadership development work and further into the science, I found in conversations that they almost had this either or approach to it, right? I can have a compassionate culture, as you talk about, and you're so passionate about, and then the results have to be sacrificed for that. And then other people would say, well, I'm going to drive results. And then in order to get those results, then, how I treat people, that's out the window. Like it's a nice to have, but not a must have. And so I was really passionate around the research and the volumes of studies that have been conducted that show, well, no, when you create those caring cultures that you and your listeners are so passionate about, then you drive exceptional business results. And so they're not, exactly. They're not in competition with one another. They're actually perfect complementary partners. You need both of them to play. And then those top organizations are the ones that really excel in those. And so that to me was just all the motivational fuel that I needed to really dive in and then have this beautiful opportunity to engage in conversations like this with you, Lyndsay, like-minded individuals who are passionate about it, and to share that message. So,
God, that is just music to my ears. And, I focus a lot on sales. And in sales, the biggest mistake I see is you have a rep who knocks it out of the park, they crush their numbers, and the company wants to magnify that. And they say, great, we'll make them a manager. And that person probably, likely, often doesn't care about anybody else besides themselves. So you're putting this person in a leadership position. They assume that means I have power. I guess I can make people do things that I want them to do without thinking like, no, let's forge connection. Let's create an opportunity for you to thrive. And it's like that piece is missing. And those people manage up really well. So they don't necessarily know how bad it is in the trenches. And it just keeps going and going and going. And it's such a lack of creativity, and it's a lack of asking people what they need. So,
You're so right. And to build on that, because you're raising such an important piece that happens time and time again, that you get an exceptional individual contributor, and then you say, oh, okay, well, now we need to quote unquote reward them by putting them in positions of leadership. And it harkens back to the classic Marshall Goldsmith book, which I think the title is just brilliant, right? What got you here won't get you there. And so you have to shift that focus. And I love what you're talking about, that because then when people get into these positions of power, then, oh, well, I'm just going to empire build for myself.
Right.
And or the other thing that often happens, and I see it all the time in my coaching work in particular, is that people have been successful as an individual within an ecosystem, and then they blindly start to say, okay, I need everybody to basically do what I did, remove any kind of creativity, any emotional connection. And then, in fact, they lose the power of the diversity of the talent, skills, experiences on the team, because they are absolutely consumed with, well, I need everybody to be just like me and do it exactly in the same way. And so you just miss so many opportunities to be successful as a collective. And just because you can be great individually doesn't mean you're going to be a great teammate, and most importantly, lead a high-performing team.
Oh my God. So we just talked about a whole bunch of challenges, but I know you see others. So what are some of the other challenges you see with leaders today?
Yeah, I think, and what's really interesting, I have such a privilege to speak to a lot of fantastic chief executives, and remember speaking to someone and they were saying, we are facing challenges today that just like if we met a couple of years ago, recorded this, right, a couple of years ago, things that we would have said, could you have imagined what we're going through right now? So pre-pandemic versus now in the pandemic as we turn the corner. So leaders today are facing challenges they've never faced before. There is people are going through their individual circumstances. There's so many mental health demands on people. And so now what's happening is, and there's so much information and things are shifting so quickly. There's a huge emphasis on being agile, adaptable, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Do other people have things to say? And for leaders who can have this mistaken assumption that, well, I've got to have all the answers and I've figured it all out. This is exactly you're
no,
it's just a whole new world. And then to your point, which I love, and again, I'm thrilled that we're here today talking about this, because and now what the situation demands and into the future is a compassionate culture and leaders who know how to connect emotionally and fully appreciate the wholeness of each individual human being on their team. And for those that have not done that before, that's incredibly challenging to do, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. So this is what I find is really tough for leaders, okay, how do I show up in that way? And by the way, manage all the things that I'm dealing with personally and professionally. So it's certainly, there's never been a more challenging time to lead than right now.
So you hit on so many things I want to talk about, but one of them, I notice, especially in sales, that you see these leaders with this mentality. I've been doing it this way for 10 years. I've been doing it this way for 15 years. I know how to do this. And everything around them has evolved. And they haven't sharpened their skills and they haven't taken a class. And they're asking everyone around them to do that, but they don't do it. Do you see that too?
For sure. And what's really, and there was a fascinating study coming back to the research that was put out where they showed that managers, leaders, executives that had a mindset around, okay, well, I can't wait to get back to the way things were. They and their teams were the ones that struggled the most, because change is the only constant, is the constant, and it's not going to slow down. It's only going to get faster. And to your point around people going, well, I've done this for 20 years. This is the right way to go. This is the only way to go. There are so many examples of leaders and organizations that refuse to listen to the data to the
Yeah.
market, to their customers, to the stakeholders, and then just kept blindly following what they thought was the right path. And they are no longer in business, or they've had a significant negative impact.
Yeah.
And if you look at the top selling leadership, business, self-development books on the market today, Adam Grant, New York Times bestselling author, Wharton professor, Think Again, his latest book. Ed Hess, I love the title of this book, Humility is the New Smart.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to humility.
That's right.
I love this.
So it's, Ozan Veril, Think Like a Rocket Scientist. It's all around continually questioning our thinking. And I love Ed Hess, one of the quotes in his book. He said, the old smart, and I had the privilege of speaking with him. He said, the old smart is the new stupid.
Yeah,
so
it is.
It's so important for us to continue to want to grow and evolve and be flexible in terms of how we approach things.
I want to talk about humility for just a second, because I experienced this. I was in a really toxic culture, and I had a boss who didn't trust me, didn't trust the team, didn't believe that I knew what I was doing, and thought my EQ was very strong, but those are soft skills and irrelevant. Anyway, one of the things that I did as a result of her critique was I went and asked each of the reps on my team, how can I be the best manager for you? And when you verbalize that, that is a very humbling question. You are admitting you don't have all the answers. And guess what? Nobody does. But the truth of the matter was everybody gave me a different response, and they had different needs. And it was just like, you don't parent your children all the same. You can't manage all your people the same. They're going to have different experience, different tenure, different age, different career aspirations. And you have to, as a leader, be responsible enough to find out what that's all about. And I'm just really intrigued by the fact that you brought up humility. What role does that play for the successful leaders that you see?
It's absolutely of paramount importance. And thank you for sharing your personal experience, because it just maps out so beautifully with my own coaching work. And what I love too, again, back to the research, right? When you survey employees and say, what qualities do you want in your leaders? Essentially, humility is pretty well at the top of the list, because if you're dealing with a narcissistic, self-centered boss, well, guess what? They're going to empire build. It's all about them.
Right.
And humble leaders shine the light on their team members. They create an engaged environment for them where they can be at their best. They're not threatened by it. They encourage it. The really fascinating and darkly humorous counterbalance is when you ask leaders, well, what qualities are most important to your success? Humility is at the bottom. They basically put it at the bottom of the list, because they're afraid it's going to be weakness. And what I love about what you're sharing, and based on your experience, which is so powerful, is when you ask people, hey, how can I serve you better? What are the ways that I can show up and be my best? Well, rather than diminish their respect for you and their confidence in you, it elevates, and they actually really want to engage with you and be more involved, and they're much more likely to give it their all, rather than, again, if I'm an arrogant person just going, well, go do it this way. It's like, fine, all right, if you want to.
The part I didn't share was they immediately turned and said, what can I do to help you? How can I make you successful? Because I don't really like how you're being treated. And I didn't expect that at all. But it created this opportunity for trust, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't. I mean, it might have happened, but asking that question really kind of opened the door wide.
And talking about building a compassionate culture, right? and a really engaging culture, and it's so fascinating. Like, what's one word that we hear all the time, right? And in sales in particular, accountability, right? We need to drive accountability. And then what's fascinating is, I remember speaking to Marshall Goldsmith about this. He said, we leaders expect people around them to be accountable, yet when do they demonstrate accountability? For example, when's the last time that you apologized for something, right? And we all make mistakes. We all make missteps. We're human beings.
Yeah.
When's the last time you asked for feedback? And if we're not leading by example, then how can we possibly expect people on our team to do it? Well, it's good for you, not for me. that just isn't the recipe
Doesn't
for a
work.
peak
It
performance
doesn't
culture.
work. Yeah. Got to be willing to push the broom.
That's right.
Everybody. So, okay, so I want to pivot a little bit because you just launched a podcast. So I want folks to hear about that because you've got words of wisdom that so dovetail so nicely on what I talk about. So tell us about that.
Well, thank you. Yes, that's wonderful. So the podcast is called "Do Good to Lead Well," and that is the title of my first book.
Yes.
And in the work that I do, and in advance of the launch of my first book, and even and at the beginning of COVID, I have the profound privilege to speak with top CEOs, best-selling authors, and TED speakers, many of whom I mentioned earlier. And so it's such a joy to have conversations like this.
Yes.
And so what I wanted to do was open it up to a broader community. And so within that podcast series, now Ozon Veril as an example,
Nice.
I have an hour conversation around how we can rethink our thinking and how to think like a rocket scientist. So I love having the opportunity to share these personal conversations with top thought leaders, and so that we can figure out how we can do good to lead well, and we can build positive relationships, positive community, positive conversations, which I know you're passionate about. So for me, having that just absolute good fortune to be able to now open that up to a broader audience was really inspirational for me.
Oh, I love it. I will be subscribing as soon as we're done here. That's awesome. And you have a new book coming out in September?
Yes, that's right. Yes, September 13th is the official launch date.
And that's called A Time to Lead?
Yes, it's called A Time to Lead, Mastering Yourself So You Can Master Your World. And the first book, Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership, I focused on 6 pillars of positive leadership based on the science. And what I was looking at was, I would say when I describe it, it was kind of like 75% was around how you lead other people. This book, A Time to Lead, is very much around self-leadership. So great leadership starts with great self-leadership. And so what I wanted to do in this book is almost have them as 2 overlapping Venn diagrams. And in this book, 75% is all around, well, how do we lead ourselves? What are the critical leadership qualities based on the latest science that we need to follow and develop in order to be successful? And then how do you translate those ideas into practice? Because sometimes, and this is an absolute valid criticism of the research sometimes, is that, well, it's an interesting idea. There's lots of great data around it. What do I do with that? How do I turn this into day-to-day practice? So that was, for me, the primary motivation in this book.
Oh, cool. And the subtitle, I want to go back to that. It's mastering yourself. That's what you say, so you can master your world.
Yes, it's mastering yourself so you can master your world. And I intentionally broke yourself into 2 words because, and even going back and forth, people would come back and go, I think you made a mistake here, Craig.
Right.
And it was really around, for a couple of things. Number one was to take a step back. So the more that we can, so Ed Hess, who I mentioned earlier, I love one of his comments, his quotes is, you are not your ideas. And so my ideas are out there. They can be debated and talked about and criticized, whatever. It's not me. It's not my identity. And so in breaking yourself into 2 words, it was really around stepping back from ourselves and looking at things with a critical lens and being mindful, a reflective lens, because sometimes, we can give far better advice to other people than what we can give to ourselves, because we're so emotionally invested in that conversation. And one of my favorite quotes is, take my advice because I won't use it anyways. And
that's great.
And this book is real around, let's take a step back and look at ourselves kind of almost like in the third person. And then the second piece was around mastering yourself. And I chose mastering because really, and this is very much a part of who you are and what you're about and what you're passionate about. This is a lifelong process. This isn't about, hey, one day we do this and it's over. It's every single day. So I wanted to really focus on the mastery and mastering in particular, because this is every single day, getting out, practicing it, developing it, learning, shifting, and growing.
It what you just mentioned, it harkens back to a conversation I've been having a lot of lately around personal branding. And if anyone in the corporate world did not get this memo, and they think that they are their job. And so their LinkedIn profile says, I'm vice president of operations, or I am director of business development, or whatever it is. And I had to learn this because I got out of corporate and became an entrepreneur. And I'm like, well, I'm not a title anymore. So who the hell am I? And so, being able to figure out you are a multifaceted, dynamic human. And guess what? That's what people are interested in. They don't just want that one piece. They want the whole package. They want to know, what do you like to do in your spare time? What's your favorite food? Do you have a dog? I mean, that's what makes you attractive to people. It makes you human and flawed, and people like a good comeback story and someone to root for. So yeah, pretty simple.
You're absolutely right. And it's all around, and we all have strengths that we bring to the table, and we all have our own interesting quirks and our own challenges and our own ways of looking at the world. And that is awesome. Like, bringing all of that together is fantastic. And then to your point, I mean, and in the work that I do with lots of large size organizations, medium size, you can have, as you say, VP of sales. Okay, so you can have the tactical, like the details around what that role is.
Sure.
And then it's a wildly different experience. And then also, depending on who sits in that role within that company, and as you shared, you can have a really horrific environment, right? Created, or you can have an amazing peak performance situation.
Yes.
And that is very much predicated on who the person is. It's not their pedigree. It's not it's who are you? What are you about? What do you value? And how do you want to show up every single day?
I mean, I imagine you have heard the good, the bad, and the ugly of leadership styles. Is there any one person that has kind of captured your attention from a really positive leadership perspective? I mean, I would have to envision, yes, there is a few because of all the research you've done, but anyone that sticks out?
Well, I have to say, and I was so blessed to be able to collaborate with him on my latest book, is Alan Mulally, the former CEO of Ford Motor Company and Boeing Commercial Airplanes. And Alan, I mean, he's had an incredibly storied career, Time Magazine, Person of the Year, all that kind of great stuff, CEO of the Year. He engineered a turnaround at Ford where their stock price was $1 or so when he took over. And then when he left, it was 1837 or some incredible shift. And he did it through, and you'll love this, right? It's the working together management system. And everything was around that everyone is valuable. We all have a role to play here. And I love this. He said, you never make a joke at someone else's expense, because people go along to get along. So respect is a foundational. You cannot take someone to task. You don't yell at people. You don't talk down to people. We all have an invaluable role to play. He applauded when people, so he had a brilliant color-coded, it was a business plan review. And so people had to show up. So at a sales meeting and say, okay, here are the green accounts, which means all systems go. Here are the yellows where it's a little off, but I think I've got an idea how to turn around. And then the reds being, I'm lost here. I don't know how to get them back. They're ghosting me or whatever. Yeah. And what he would do is he would applaud the reds. And he said, all of us have challenges, so let's get them. And we're all responsible together to be able to figure this out. It's not on you.
Yeah, it's embracing the failure and learning from it. And, that's such an important opportunity. I think the leaders that kind of berate you over your foolish blunder, you're going to beat yourself up enough. You don't need somebody else to do it for you. The right leader is going to say, okay, well, what can we do better? And why didn't that work? And maybe there's another way. So let's take the parts that did and build on that. So yeah, I get that. That's
And you're so right, Lyndsay. And we're all in this together, right? So how do you build a compassionate culture? Well, we're all in this together. And we're all going to have some challenges, every single one of us. And the faster they get to the table, the quicker we can start to dissect them and figure out what we want to do. And then the faster we can get the right people to jump in and start to problem solve, well, we're all going to succeed. And so the fact that Alan was able to do that in two global, right? I mean, Boeing, I mean, pretty well every plane in the sky, Boeing and Ford, massive, right? Global auto manufacturer. And so the fact that, because sometimes in the work that I do, people say, oh, well, compassionate cultures or positive leadership, that's nice in a smaller boutique or, an entrepreneurial firm or maybe mid-market. And for me, the fact that not only did he bring these into two globally recognized brands, some of the most well-known, respected brands in the world, it was unbelievably successful, right? And everybody bought in. And they had incredible engagement scores when he left, I think in the 90th percentile. And when he came in, they were really, really struggling. So this is not just feel good, touchy-feely, let's be soft. This drove, as I mentioned, share price and an exceptional employee experience.
I for the audience, I'm just going to repeat kind of what Craig just said, because this is not just for little tiny boutiques. These are massive companies that did a full turnaround and their stock rebounded because of their behaviors. So for anybody that thinks this is a nice to have still, in case you didn't get any of my last 100 memos, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And the power has shifted to the people. So if you're not doing it, they will go somewhere where the leaders are. And that is the thing that I think both of us are trying to teach leaders. When you can recognize you can get the same results in a compassionate, kind way. Well, maybe it's not the same results. Maybe the results are better.
Yes.
But, when you just beat people up and yell at them, they're not going to be motivated. They're going to be stressed. They're going to be anxious. And I use this example all the time. I had a boss who said, I don't like how you showed up on that call. I don't like how you represented us. You didn't do a good job and don't do it again. Well, how do you think I did on the next call?
Right.
I sucked. I was horrible. I was stressed. I was anxious. I wasn't relying on my sense of humor. I wasn't relying on my instincts. Now, had they said, how do you think that call went?
Exactly.
I didn't love how I did it. Well, what can we do to make it better? Can we role play? Would that help? What do you not have information on? Who can I pair you with so you can get what you need? Because you got this. Same expressed, concern, but just done in a much kinder way. And you're going to get better results and you're going to maintain that trust. And that's the point. So
well, exactly. And then you're inspiring, and it's a great example, right? It's a beautiful example, because if you're just shutting someone down and basically criticizing right out of the gate, then they're just going to want to exit the conversation as quickly as possible, feel terrible. And then what have they learned? Okay, I did it wrong, maybe for my boss. And there's no information sharing. And I love, the questions, right? How do you feel it went? What could we have done differently? And even if they came back, and this is a fun discussion I have with leaders and executives I coach, if they said, hey, I thought it was the best sales conversation I've ever had, then not to pile on and say, well, no, that was terrible.
Not really.
But say, okay, tell me more. What do you think? And then if we have information that we feel like, this wasn't a great one, then we could throw that into questions, right? Well, how do you think they felt, or what do you think they took out of it when this was discussed? Oh, and then it really is a teaching moment. Again, it's a compassionate moment. It's a collaborative moment. And now, rather than, well, I'm going to tear someone down, we're going to figure this out together. Or as the executive,
that person's going to rise up. That person's going to die on the vine for that leader who took the compassion with them.
Well, you're so right. And the leader might learn something, because then the person may say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And they knew something about this particular prospect as an example. And then you go, oh, that totally makes sense to me because my information is limited. So in approaching it as a human conversation, an open conversation, I love how you framed it, Lyndsay, is a curious conversation through questions. That's the path to success.
So can we shift a little and talk about feedback? Because I know
Sure.
you talk about feedback in your book, and you talk about receiving feedback, but you didn't talk about giving feedback. So explain that.
Yeah, well, and I have to, Doug Stone, who wrote, so for any of your listeners, he wrote the book on conflict, Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most, international bestseller, just absolutely extraordinary. He wrote an amazing book called Thanks for the Feedback. And when I had the great fortune of speaking with him about it, he said, there are tons of books, tons of webinars around giving feedback.
Lots.
What is out there about how do you receive it? And then if you're going to be giving feedback, coming back to one of your points earlier, Lyndsay, right, about modeling that, well, how are we when it comes to receiving it? So if self-leadership, great self-leadership is understanding, well, who we are and how we come across to other people. So in order for me to get access to the best quality information, I have to learn how to receive feedback. And there are a lot of different barriers that can get in the way from me hearing the feedback that people are providing me. And also, and I love the example that you provided earlier as well, in terms of the types of questions we can ask, in terms of, to get the best quality feedback as well. And so that's really the emphasis, once again, around self-leadership, so that we can set the stage so we are in maximum position to hear what's being said, and then also put ourselves in the best position to create an environment in which that people will be willing to give it to us.
So well said. And you're right. There's a million books out there on giving feedback. So receiving it, what people need to understand, it's a gift. And even if it's done in a rotten way, it's still a gift. And I was fired once from a job, and as it was never part of my career path and never something I planned for. And anyone that knew me was like, that doesn't happen. What are you talking about? But it was a gift because it set me up for this next chapter of my life. And even if it hurts, take a breath and think about what it is they're trying to say. Maybe their delivery was bad, but there's something in there that you probably need to hear. It's tough.
It's such a brilliant point that you're making. And Ken Blanchard famously said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And one of the things, I remember talking to a workshop participant, I think I put this in the book as well, where they said, if feedback is the breakfast of champions, why are so few people excited to join us for that meal? So I'm like, that's so right. And the point you made, though, which is so important, is that sometimes, or oftentimes, we can dismiss the feedback because of how poorly it was delivered. Yep. Yet that we miss now, because we just say, oh, well, they delivered
the nugget. Yeah,
that's right. There can still be a nugget there. And it's essential not to throw that out because the delivery was poor. Yeah. And so when I spoke to Doug Stone as an example, one of the things, and he shared with me, one of the barriers is that we can start to look for what's wrong with the feedback so I can dismiss it, right? Throw the whole thing out. And you identified a perfect one, right? Oh, it was delivered in a mean way, so I'm not going to listen. And then he had this brilliant question, which I share with my coaching clients, which is, ask ourselves what's right about the feedback. And then that can be, and as you say, that's where the gift can be, and especially when it's tough. And I encourage people, when they receive feedback that's really difficult to hear, spend longer with it.
Yes.
Because there is probably, this maybe, it's not guaranteed, yet it's likely to be a blind spot that we had, and or it's tied up into our identity. So I've had people who, someone has said, oh, well, they're angry about something, like they come across as angry. and they can react really negatively. And what's happening is they're so passionate about something that it does come across as anger.
Yeah.
And then armed with that insight, when they turn the corner around that, and rather than react to the label, listen to the message, now what they do is come in and go, hey, I'm so excited about things that I can sometimes sound angry, or I'm being confrontational or combative. That's not at all my intention here. If I show up like that on a one-on-one or in a team meeting, raise your hand, because this is not, back to compassionate environment, this is not the environment I want to create. And I need your help, because this is how I tend to show up.
Like you said, taking that time to marinate, like if you have to write the angry email, write it, leave it, don't send it, don't even put an address in the top, get it all out, walk away. Some people say wait 24 hours, at least wait an hour for Pete's sake, but wait, take a breath, and then sit and say, okay, well, why did I get this? And why did it hurt so much? And what would be the real gift is to go back to whoever gave you the feedback and say, I got what you were saying. I didn't love the delivery, but I understand the point behind it. And it hurt to hear it. And I can do better on this. Now, that person that gave you that wretched feedback that hurt so much is going to be like, whoa, that I didn't know I hurt you, number one, but number two, like, amazing that you didn't respond back at me with some like horrible, why are you like this? Whatever it is you want to say. But I think it's such a gift back to the person that gave the feedback, because it's a little bit of a mirror for them.
Well, and you're so right. And what I love about this, and it's exciting to me because these are core ideas that I'm passionate about, is, this is about mastering our emotions and our emotional reaction, right? And so taking the time to cool down the emotional temperature around that, and sit with that. And the other point that you made, which is so powerful, is that when you go back and follow up, you're absolutely right that it's a great gift to the other person. And here's the other thing, and it's one of the key strategies we can use to get high quality feedback. Let people know how we best receive feedback. Because even if you have feedback for me, Lyndsay, if I haven't shared with you, A, that I'm interested in it, and B, the best way for you to tell me, you can sit there and, no, you know what? It's too big of a risk. I'm not sure, and I don't want to, or maybe Craig knows about it. And so this is such a powerful opportunity to be proactive in this, where we can go to people and go, hey, I want to get feedback from you. I trust you. You're a valued part of my network. And here's the best way for me to receive that information. And hey, would you like feedback from me? And then if so, what's the best way for me to give it to you? Back to being the role model for the environment we want to create.
I think there's also a little bit of people say they want feedback, but they only really want the good feedback. And I think that needs to go by the wayside. If you're saying you want feedback, you want the pluses and the minuses, and you have to be willing to listen and grow. And again, it's a vulnerable position to put yourself in, but if you're surrounding yourself with a bunch of people that say yes all the time, you're not going to grow either. So you want people to challenge you to make you better.
You're absolutely right. Otherwise it becomes an echo chamber. And then, hey, how awesome am I? And everyone's, yeah, you're awesome. And then we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's not, we all have challenges. Back to, Alan's business plan review, right? We have green, yellow, and reds every single day. And to pretend otherwise is a recipe for failure. And so now what we want to do is just say, okay, let's gather that feedback. What's a key strength that I bring to the table? What's a key challenge, right? Where can I serve you better? And where do I serve you well? And have a balanced approach to that, so I can continue to do the things that are having a positive impact, and then make changes, meaningful changes, in the gaps that are there.
So this was like a beautiful segue into authenticity, which is such a buzzword right now. And everybody's talking about how you got to be authentic, you got to show up, and authenticity is everything. I want your perspective on authenticity, because I'm hearing it so much right now, it almost feels forced. Like, I'm so authentic, like you can trust me. It's like too much, but I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. It's one of those, and it's one of those qualities that that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think, and one topic of conversation, it's like, well, what if my authentic self is a bit of a jerk? Like, what if what if I'm really ornery and unfriendly, or I've got this really unhappy look on my face? And so a couple of things around it, because what's interesting that I find in the space around authentic leadership is, in a lot of cases, people over index authentic and under index leadership, because really what leadership is about bringing out the best in a group of individuals, right?
Yes.
It's about moving forward. So for me, I like to bring balance to the force, right? So don't forget the leadership side of authentic, because if you're not bringing people along, well, that's not leadership.
Mm-mm.
The other piece that I would say, and it ties nicely to what we were just talking about, is having an honest appraisal about who I am.
Yeah.
What are and we talked about humility early on, which I think is a beautiful bridge too, right? What is humility? A lot of times people think it's weakness. No, humility is, I have an understanding of the strengths that I bring to the table, and I also have an understanding of the gaps. And so from an authentic leadership perspective, particularly on the challenges, like, again, if I tend to be combative, or if I tend to be a little, I have a stoic outlook, or I tend to be pretty serious. Well, these are wonderful. In the coaching work that I do, I'll say, hey, let people know. All of us have our natural tendencies. So the more that you can empower people and let them know, hey, just like the example we talked about a few minutes ago, I might come across as combative or angry. That's not my intention. It's a natural style that I have. Please let me know. Everyone goes, you know what? That's awesome. That's great. I have my things too. And so the more we can let people into our universe, the better. And I think the real key, as well as, and I find this also in terms of people go, oh, well, that's who I am. This is the other thing. Authenticity, I find the big gap is almost like an excuse. Exactly.
Yeah.
Be an excuse to be a bully. Well, that's just that's who I am. Deal with it. It's not my issue. Again, in a leadership position, that's not, in any position, leadership in particular, that's not leadership. That's not leader behavior.
Yeah.
And
to
so
me,
now what's really critical is, how do we show up in a way that's going to drive our success?
Yeah. To me, it's misusing radical candor.
Yes.
And to me, I mean, radical candor is not the ability to go be brutally honest to everyone you meet. Radical candor is being able to give feedback in a positive way that teaches someone, I want to give you this feedback because I think it's going to make you better. And I believe in you and I have faith in you. And this is why I'm doing it. And I think this whole leadership style of like, oh, I'm going to be honest. Would you want me to lie to you? Yeah, well, maybe a little.
And you're so right. I mean, the radical candor, and again, it's a great idea. And then what happens is that people take the headline and then just use it as, oh, okay, well, then I can be a bully. I'm just being honest. And coming back to, and again, the Alan Mulally, you don't disrespect, never a joke at someone else's expense. No. You don't make a personal attack. You can comment and explore an issue or an idea. Sure. It's not personal.
All right. What do you think the future of leadership looks like? Because we've gone through this pandy and we're talking about how they need to evolve. What's going to happen?
Well, I think we're going to continue to go through an extraordinary pace of change. The VUCA environment, as it's often called, right? The volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is just going to go even higher. And I feel now leadership, that agility, the agility in thinking, and in particular, and this is why I was really excited to be here and speak with you today, the focus on compassionate cultures. and humanistic leadership and authentic connection and conversation, that is an invaluable currency. If you look at, which we haven't even talked about, you look at the broader environment of AI, right, and technology. We need to, what is our competitive advantage as human beings? It's doing things that AI and technology, they're behind us. And so those quote unquote soft skills they are challenging to acquire, and they're going to become even more mission critical as we move into the future, because that's going to be where the difference is, right? And if we're no better, if someone just as well can interact with a computer as they can with a human being, or it's even worse to interact with a human being, we're in a lot of trouble. So I feel like that humanistic side of work is going to be, that's going to be top of mind. And you see it now in the Great Resignation. You see it in terms of what people are looking for in work cultures and the type of work that they do. This is going to be at the top of the food chain in terms of priorities.
Well, I gotta say, Craig, this is like, you're my new muse, because you're putting the science behind everything I know to be true. And this was such validation that we're on the right track, we're doing the right thing. And as you know, I'm fiercely passionate about making this world a better place for people to work. So I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you were here today. How can people find you?
Oh, well, thank you. And I have to say, I love, this is something that to me is just an absolute privilege and pleasure for me, is to be able to connect with like-minded people. And I love how enthusiastic, how passionate you are about positive workplaces and positive leadership and compassionate cultures, and getting people to think about how we treat one another. So thanks to you for putting this together and amplifying this conversation, because this is really important. Because you look at the media and everything else, sometimes it's, where is this? And so to create this conversation, I just absolutely love it. So if people want to connect, my website, craigdowden.com, they can please reach out on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, say Lyndsay sent you. So
please do.
That would be awesome. Yeah. I'd be happy. And they're absolute the best ways to connect. Subscribe to the podcast. It's on Spotify and Amazon and Google and all of those, Apple. So please check out the Do Good to Lead Well podcast. And this has just been an absolute pleasure for me.
Oh, likewise, my friend. This is the beginning of a long friendship. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and stay tuned for another episode of Heartbeat for Hire. Thanks for listening to Heartbeat for Hire. If you like what you hear, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and leave a 5-star review. To keep the conversation going, you can find me on Insta or at LinkedIn at Lyndsay Dowd, H4H, or you can reach me at my website, heartbeatforhire.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day.